Instead of being a man of prominence, at the age of 80, Moses was ignominious and altogether unknown. Moses was just tending sheep, giving a life to the sheep. He thought that he was outside of the will and the way of God. Moses lived as if God did not know who he was, or where he was, or what he was doing. But one day, God appeared. One day, God showed up. Somebody say, God showed up.
God showed up.
And Moses, when God showed up, God demonstrated that he knew where Moses was all of the time. This morning, I want to inform you or reassure you that God knows who you are. Yes, he does. He knows who you are. He knows where you are, and he knows what you have been doing. God knows the motives and intents of your heart, and maybe you want to know. Maybe somebody here under the sound of my voice wants to know, how can I get away from him? Where can I go from God's Spirit? How can I escape his presence? A man named David said, if I ascend into heaven, he's there. If I make my bed in hell, he's there. If I take the wings of the morning and go to the uttermost parts of the sea, he's there. Even there his hand shall lead me, his right hand shall hold me. So child of God, he knows where you are.
All right. Yeah.
He knows what you've been doing. Moses was there with his sheep. God left Moses alone for 40 years. Help me, somebody. Then suddenly God appears and comes into his space. I have to tell you today that God moves in a mysterious way.
Amen.
He's sovereign. He can do whatever he wants to do, but sometimes God does some peculiar stuff. Some peculiar stuff. I will not be too long. Here Moses was minding his business, tending his sheep, and God suddenly comes unannounced. God does something totally radical, and Moses is stunned, totally discombobulated, all shook up. Look at God.
Look at God.
He starts a fire in a bush.
All right.
And I think you know that fire destroys stuff. Recently out west there was a burning fire that destroyed the whole forest land out there. I believe it was in Oklahoma. It destroyed everything in its pathway. Fire destroys stuff. Fire ain't nothing to mess with. But here is Moses standing there gazing at a bush that God set on fire, but the fire is not being consumed. The fire is not burning up. That's strange stuff.
That's right.
In other words, God set a fire and then regulated the combustion of the fire so that the bush burned like a candle. And he sure enough got Moses' attention. Oh, child of God, when God gets ready, he can get your attention. Yes, he can. I don't care who you are or what your situation may be. God can surprise you and make you look his way. It reminds me of what God did during those obvious days of segregation in America, the obvious days. We're still being segregated against. It may not be so obvious. That technology, part of that technology is a good form of segregation, because the brothers on the corner haven't got used to that right now, and they're standing out there idle in the marketplace. It bothers me, it bothers you. That's a form of segregation. But after 244 years of slavery, another 100 years of the evils of segregation, one day a lady boarded a bus and God showed up on that bus. And after all those years of status quo, of obeying unjust laws, white only and colored only in this country called America, one day Rosa Parks said, no, not going to take it anymore, not going to go to the back of the bus. And a whole movement of nonviolent resistance began in America, all because God showed up. Well, God got the attention of Moses. Moses, pull off your shoes. I want to talk to you for a little while. You're standing on holy ground. Moses, I've seen the affliction of my people. Moses, I've heard the cries of my people. I know the sorrows of my people, and I am come down to deliver them.
Amen.
I am come down. I want you to go down to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Hear me this morning. I tell you, my brothers and my sisters, I want you to know today that God has seen your affliction.
Yes.
I told you when I started, I didn't come here for everybody, but just like Israel, just like God saw Israel, I didn't come here for everybody. Somebody here today is going through something. I am here on assignment to talk to the folk who are going through trials, and somebody through a quiet storm, and somebody is going through a loud lamentation where life feels like you're losing. I tell you, God knows your affliction. God told Moses, I've seen the affliction of my people. Somebody here at Bethel this morning has some hurt. Somebody here today is dealing with the crushing blows of life, and I don't know who you are, but the stormy winds are blowing in your life. The contrary winds are blowing against somebody in this congregation this morning. It may be you got a crisis in your home. I don't know. It may be you've been laid off on your job. It may be you got stress in your life that's killing you, or perhaps your children are acting a fool today, but somebody here this morning is all shook up. Turn to somebody and say, is it you? Let me tell you what God told me. God said, I've seen your situation. God has said to me to tell you, I'm watching your reaction. I'm looking at you, and I know you're trying to get through this, and God is observing closely your behavior. God told me to tell you, I see you. God sees you. God sees you. As a matter of fact, God says, I've heard your cries. The fact of the matter is, I'm holding your tears in a bottle. As a matter of fact, I know you've been crying a lot. The fact of the matter is, even when you're trying to pray, you've been crying. God said, when you grunt and groan under the weight of what you're going through, I hear you moaning this afternoon. God hears our moan. We don't moan much anymore. Our old people used to moan. M-O-A-M, they used to moan because they couldn't say what they were trying to say. They couldn't pray the way they were trying to pray. They couldn't articulate what they were trying to express. They could not get out of their spirits what they were trying to get home to God, and so they just began to moan in their spirit. Way down in the deep regions of their soul. God says, I've not only seen your affliction, but God hears you even in your unspoken thoughts. He hears the cries of your voice. Aren't you glad about that this afternoon? I'm glad. God knows the sound of my voice. It's me, oh Lord. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Aren't you glad about that? That God knows your voice. The psalm writer says in Psalm 130, out of the depths I've cried, Lord, hear my voice. Don't you know that a mama can go to a mall and lose one of her 3 children, and in that great big crowd in the mall, that child will begin to holler, Mama, I'm over here, and through the noise of the crowd, Mama can hear that voice. I used to have a prayer ministry on the radio called The Healing Place. And every Saturday morning, I would just pray for hurting people. As they would call in, I would pray for them. And after a while, they didn't have to tell me their name. I recognized the sound of their voice. And if I am who I am, a black African-American preacher can hear and recognize the sound of the voice of a caller coming on the telephone. Don't you know God knows your voice, and He knows the sound of your cry. Now I got to tell you something here this afternoon. God will answer your prayer. He's a prayer answering God. He's a prayer hearing God, but He'll take care of His regular customers first. You got to line up and get familiar with God. You got to get on the power line. You got to get in your secret closet. voice. You got to say, Father, I stretch my hand to thee. No other help I know. And he will begin to recognize your voice. I've heard people say, I don't know how to pray. Prayer is the holy hookup with God. And prayer is putting your voice in the ear of God. Prayer is talking to God like you're talking to a natural man, because he knows what you're going through already. And oh, child of God, God knows your voice. Whatever note you sing, God knows the tone and tenor of your cry. Be encouraged, child of God. Lift up your head, weary soldier. God knows what you've been going through. He knows